Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Confidants, I just want to tell you about a book that I've written called Fool Me Twice. It's my memoir and it's a story of how I was scammed and assaulted while online dating. It was a difficult book to write because I really had to overcome the shame of my choices. But I wanted to do it so that I could help other people not get caught in the same trap that I was. At the end of the book, there are a whole lot of suggestions of what people need to look out for and how they can date safely online. My book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online, and it's also in Hong Kong bookstores. Here is a promo for my book. I hope you enjoy it.
From life on a farm in rural Australia, where wide open spaces made a young woman yearn to know what was beyond her country town. She moved to the city, became a mother, and found her dream career which took her across the world. But still, something was missing. In her search for love, she traveled far, trusted deeply. She wanted so badly to find someone that she almost lost herself in the process, and learned some hard lessons along the way. Fool Me Twice, a new memoir by Jules Hannaford. Available on Amazon.
Today I'm here with Kate Bridle. Hi Kate, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Jules, thank you very much for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you today because you're a sleepologist. What's the word?
Polysomnographist or sleep specialist.
A polysomnographist.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mouthful. Even I've got that wrong a few times. So that basically essentially means that I am certified to read and interpret sleep studies.
So what do you study at university to be a polysomnographer? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nailed it. I went to university and I did human biology and physiology. I didn't have a clear intention of what I wanted to do after that in mind, but I just did it because I loved the subject and I was interested in the human body and how we work. I went to a university called Loughborough in the UK, and they happened to have a big sleep research centre at the university. So as part of my degree, there was quite a lot of sleep biology and sleep science incorporated into it, which I just found really interesting. And in my final year project, I did a research study using some of my fellow students. I wired them up, looked at their sleep, and analysed all the data. And from there, I was really hooked on how interesting sleep is and what happens. We think nothing happens when we're asleep at night, but actually there's so much that goes on in the brain. So that's how it all started for me.
Oh, that sounds cool. When you wired up your friends to research them, was that overnight? Like, did you have to stay up all night or did you get them to take naps?
So no, it was overnight, but I wired them up in the research centre and then I sent them home. So it was like portable equipment. So they had lots of wires connected to their head and they carried this little box with them and they went back to their rooms and they slept. And then the next morning I went to their room and took off all the electrodes.
Oh, so is it a little bit like the Fitbits that we know now that can track your sleep? Was that the similar sort of technology? But
a little bit, but far more advanced. So the electrodes were actually glued directly onto the brain, so picking up the direct brain activity, whereas the Fitbits really just monitor movement and pulse rate, which you can get a fairly good idea of when you're asleep, when you're awake, but not so accurate in detecting the type of sleep. And the research I was looking at really deep sleep, which is the really important stuff that we need to get to restore physically. And I was looking at how much people got after doing something new and different, after a novel day of exciting activities. So I had to be very specific in looking at the actual brain waves I was capturing.
Oh, so interesting. Were you giving the people that you were studying like overstimulating activities or new and exciting things and then seeing if they slept as well as if they might have on a normal day? And what did you find?
And there was a good find after this novel day out and having these new experiences. They had a much stronger level of deep sleep. So the intensity of their deep sleep was much stronger after this day out. Yeah, it was a really good finding. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough numbers for it to be statistically published and significant and published, but it showed a really good trend and it led on to some more research later. So
does that indicate that doing something different stimulates the brain and so your brain gets more kind of exercise in inverted commas and then it sleeps better? Or is it because you're out and about doing things and you're getting more physical exercise?
Well, it wasn't so much physical. There was physical activity involved. It was walking around we actually went to the Nottingham caves, some underground caves, and looked around some interesting areas, but it suggested it was more the new information. And I like the way you put it, the brain exercise.
Yeah. So that would indicate then if people are kind of stuck in a routine and they're not sleeping well, if they can break that routine and do something different and interesting, then they may be able to get better sleep.
Yeah, definitely.
What does it mean when we hear the term poor sleep hygiene?
So sleep hygiene is a term that's been given for people that have developed habits that are not conducive to good sleep. So a lot of us know from reading in the media now that there's a lot of things that are counted as poor sleep hygiene, like looking at your phone immediately before bed, having caffeine late at night. So all of these habits, lifestyle habits that will lead to not a very good night's sleep.
And how can people break these habits if they are finding that they're not sleeping and they're looking at their phone or they're drinking coffee in the afternoon, but they feel that they can't stop that? What do you do when you work with people to get them to break these habits?
Often when people come to see me, often they will have quite significant chronic insomnia that they've had for a number of years, because a lot of information is out there and a lot of people that just have a little bit of poor sleep will be able to go and read and educate themselves and learn and try different things, even though it is difficult to give up habits. But people that come to see me generally have quite an ingrained chronic problem. And it's important to sort of do it one step at a time, because you can't just ask someone to sort of change their lifestyle, change everything that they know and love in one go. It doesn't tend to work. It's not sustainable. The first thing I tend to do with people, and the most important thing, is to set an anchor time, which is set a wake time that they have to stick to regularly.
What do you mean?
That means that no matter what time they go to bed, they need to wake up at the same time each morning. And that includes the weekends.
Right.
Because the way we sleep and the way that our brain works is that we build up this sleep drive during the awake hours that we have. And only after a certain amount of awake hours do we feel that drive to fall asleep. So the first thing before we start looking at the sleep hygiene really is to set that wake anchor time to make sure that your body's starting to understand that it gets sleepy at the same time each evening. So that would be the first step. And then we start looking at the habits as well and trying to just make small changes. So if someone is a serious coffee drinker, they drink coffee, morning and afternoon, we'll just start to cut it back to just the morning and replacing their afternoon coffee with either a decaf or a herbal tea, because often it's the habit. So people like to have it in the afternoon. And sometimes when people got a caffeine addiction and they're drinking coffee all day, it doesn't actually give them a buzz anymore. They just drink it out of habit. So it's just about explaining that and getting them to find something else to enjoy.
And do you think coffee plays a big part in people not sleeping well?
It certainly affects our sleep quality. The first thing people will say to me is, oh no, caffeine doesn't affect me. I still fall asleep fine, but then my sleep quality is not very good. And that is exactly it. People will maybe have enough sleep drive to fall asleep, but we know from the studies and when we watch in the laboratory, after people have had even a little bit of caffeine within that sort of 7-8 hours before bed, their sleep quality, the amount of the deep sleep they have is affected, and they're in and out of light and deep sleep a lot more than someone who doesn't have caffeine in the system.
On a good night's sleep, what would it look like with the light and the deep sleep? How do people normally sleep, and what's REM sleep?
Good questions.
Thank you. I'm making them up as I go along.
So a normal adult sleep cycle consists of around 90-minute cycles on average. And you would start off in quite a light sleep, non-REM. So there's two broad types of sleep, non-REM and REM, which I'll explain. Non-REM is categorized into 3 different stages. There's stage 1, 2, and 3. And 1 and 2 are light sleep, and 3 is deep sleep. And that's the deep stuff where our brain waves are really big and slow, and we're getting all that restorative physical growth and repair. And then after that, we come into a period of REM sleep at the end of each cycle. And REM is when we dream. And often people say REM is a very deep form of sleep, and that is wrong. It's not. It's actually quite an active form of sleep. Our brain waves look very similar to when we're awake. And we're having lots of random memories from long ago, from recently, flashing around. It's almost a bit like not so important information and sort of reorganize everything. And also there's a lot of emotional processing that happens in REM sleep as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the two different types of sleep, the non-REM and the REM, both serve very different functions, but both very important. So each cycle, at around 90 minutes, we'll have some light sleep, some deep sleep, and some REM sleep. As each cycle goes throughout the night, the proportion of deep sleep will get less and the proportion of REM sleep will increase. Often if you have a lie-in or you sleep longer at the weekends, you'll wake up out of a dream because you're usually mostly in dream sleep at that point.
And why do we feel like we've been dreaming all night when we wake up? Because we're sort of in that dream. Have we been dreaming all night sometimes?
No. If you do tend to wake up feeling like you've been dreaming all night, it is often a sign of sleep disruption because we really do only remember our dreams when we wake up out of them. And if we wake up for sort of more than a minute or two. So we really should only remember that last dream we wake up out of, and it should only really be memorable for 30, 40 minutes or so, unless it was something quite distressing, or sometimes they stick with us throughout the day a little bit longer, like when you wake up and you think your husband's cheated on you and then you're angry with him for a week.
Speaking from experience, perhaps.
But generally you shouldn't remember a whole night of dreaming. It's actually a sign of poor sleep quality.
I was in menopause and my sleep went really badly disrupted during menopause, and I've been in menopause and perimenopause for 10 years. So during that time, to manage, I went on sleeping tablets, and I felt that I had to do that because I'm so busy that I wasn't going to be able to function without it. I've since come off them, and I really feel like now I'm going into that deep sleep now that I'm sleeping without these tablets, and it feels like I wasn't when I was on sleeping tablets. Would that be correct?
So it could be, yes. Depending on the type of sleeping tablets, there are lots of different types. But when we look at people in the sleep lab who were on sleeping tablets, it gives sort of an artificial sleep. And different tablets can affect the different types of sleep we have. So some will significantly reduce the amount of non-REM sleep, deep sleep, and some will significantly reduce the amount of REM sleep we have. But overall, generally people stay asleep for longer and fall asleep quicker. So people feel like it's sort of quite a relief to be on them because after not sleeping for a long time or having very disrupted sleep, they feel like they're at least getting some sleep. But actually, the benefits of having a natural night's sleep are not there. They wake up often feeling a bit groggy. And after a while, you do become psychologically dependent on them. So yes, it changes the sleep architecture, which is the type of sleep we get when, and actually the proportions of each type of sleep as well.
And the interesting thing I've noticed now that I'm not taking them, and I have had some terrible night's sleep. In fact, one night I didn't sleep at all. It felt like I didn't sleep at all. But is it possible I did sleep?
Yes.
Even though I thought I was awake the whole night?
Yes. A lot of people have what we call sleep state misperception, which is feeling as if they haven't slept at all. But actually, if we were monitoring them with the electrodes, you can have sort of states where you're almost half in, half out of sleep. And that will feel as if you are conscious all night. But you're generally not. It's very rare to have a complete night with no sleep. But you can have lots of wake periods and those in and out, sort of half in, half out periods where you wake up and all you feel like is you've been awake all night.
Yeah, I'm still convinced I didn't sleep at all that night, but I was wondering if perhaps I had. But the thing that I've noticed is I used to feel absolutely panicked that if it was still 2 or 3 in the morning and I knew I had to get up at 6, how was I going to function with only 3 hours sleep? But what I've actually learned is first not to panic. And if I only get 3 or 2 hours sleep, it's okay. I can function for that day and I will sleep the next night. So that's what I'm learning with this change is that like I'm having one day on and one day off. And now that I've been off them for quite a while, I'm starting to get more regular nights where I'm getting proper sleep.
That is exactly what we tend to find happens unless there's some other underlying problem. But when you're coming off them, it is usually the panic and the anxiety around, I'm not going to sleep, I'm going to feel awful tomorrow, that prevents the sleep. Sleep is something that the harder we try to do it or the more we worry about not being able to do it, the less likely it will come. So you are doing exactly the right thing in telling yourself. And a lot of what I do is sort of the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is retraining your thoughts around, if I don't sleep, what's the worst that's going to happen? Yes, I might feel tired tomorrow. I might not be at my absolute best, but I will be absolutely fine. And what I'll do is I'll use this extra sleep pressure that I'm building tonight through these hours of not sleeping so well to get a bed night's sleep tomorrow. And eventually, if you keep telling yourself that and you start to believe it, you become more relaxed about the whole thing and sleep comes easier. So that's exactly right. And like you say, if you've had a bad night that first night, usually the next night you're so tired that you'll have a good one. And then you just want to maintain that regular wake up time, maintain other good habits such as moving a lot during the day, getting physical activity, getting plenty of daylight, sunlight in the daytime helps us to get more melatonin and better sleep at night. So those sort of healthy habits, and don't let a bad night's sleep disrupt how you feel and how you go about your next day. Because sometimes we try and accommodate for a bad night's sleep by
taking a day off and then napping or whatever. Get up and go to work.
Going to bed early the next night, for example. And all of these things disrupt our sleep drive and our circadian rhythm again. So the key is if you have a bad night's sleep, and it's tough because when you have a bad night's sleep, it affects your motivation, your mood, everything. You obviously know how that feels. But it really is to not over worry about it and to carry on your day as you planned. And sleep will come if you keep doing that.
Yeah, and it's starting to work. Yeah. So it's brilliant. The other thing I'm trying to do is cut down my sugar because I've been wondering how much sugar plays into the fact that I haven't been sleeping well. Does that play a part in lack of sleep?
So there's been a lot of research recently, really interesting research around diet and sleep interaction. Now, obviously, most of us know that diet and what we put into the body affects so much around how we function. And I don't know if you've heard much about the gut microbiome and the gut-brain connection, but a lot of research has been going on around that, and I find it really interesting. So I'm not an expert in this, but there's been lots of research to suggest that lots of processed sugar and high sugary foods and the highly processed foods, we know that that causes inflammation in the body. So one way that can affect sleep is through being physically uncomfortable and increasing pain and pain perception through inflammation and poor diet. And the other way is they now think that actually there's melatonin, our sleep hormone, is actually produced by the gut as well as the brain. The sugar negatively affects the gut bacteria. So if you're having lots of sugar and enough of the good stuff, the fiber and the natural foods, we change our gut bacteria and we encourage the bad bacteria to grow. The sugar, they get fed by it and they love it and they grow, and the good stuff sort of slowly gets pushed away. And then we don't have the right hormones produced for sleep. And there's so many different hormones, it's very complicated, but essentially, especially around menopause as well, there's lots of very fine, delicate balances in hormones, and hormones are going all over the place. So we want to really make sure that we're giving our gut and our hormones the best chance of keeping everything on track.
Great. So I'm cutting sugar as well.
Great.
So that's what I'm also doing. And I feel like that's getting me somewhere as well. It's very hard. And it's actually, I haven't cut it completely, but it has made me realize how kind of addicted I am to it and how I have this real dip around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I feel like yawny and like, oh gosh, I feel exhausted, but I get over it.
Yeah.
But I really think that's linked to the fact that I'm trying to cut the sugar and I'm noticing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great thing to cut out for a while and see how your body responds. The other thing is we know that it affects our mood, again, through the brain connection, I guess, and can increase anxieties. And that anxiety is one of those things that will really sort of affect our sleep. We're very sensitive to it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because I've had anxiety. So last year I developed anxiety writing my book, and then just with all the pressure of the podcast and school and everything that I was doing, and I got a tooth infection, which lasted for 6 months. So I had all of this and it really turned into me feeling anxious. So I cut coffee. That was the first thing I did, got rid of that. That's gone. Then I cut the sleeping tabs. Now I'm trying to cut the sugar. Next thing I've got to try and fit in some exercise, but I'm finding that hard to find the time to do. But it's so interesting because all of my anxiety's gone. It's literally gone away since I've made those changes.
It's a few small changes that if you do them consistently make a big difference. A lot of people will expect, cut it out for a week and I don't see any difference. But it takes a lot longer than that for the gut bacteria to change, for our hormones to settle. So make small changes and stick with them and you start to see results.
Yes, that's really, the key.
It's really positive.
Do you know anything about the effect of CBD oil on sleep?
I don't know a huge amount about it. I do know that obviously there's a lot of trials and tests going on at the moment. Essentially, I believe it affects the neurotransmitters and hormones that relax us, which will obviously reduce anxiety, and people who suffer with anxiety or pain, it can help them. I do know a couple of people that have tried it and have had good results. But
from my reading, I understand that it works really quite well for sleep, anxiety, and for joints. It's a wonder drug, isn't it? Yeah,
so
it is.
I'm certainly not against it, and I don't know enough about the clinical evidence yet. I don't think there's any, but certainly it seems to be safe for people to try, and some people have had good results. So, if it works for you, then
absolutely. And can you tell me, what are some of the typical reasons that people might not be able to sleep? We've mentioned some of them, like anxiety, work stress, menopause.
So there's so many reasons. Pretty much everything we do in our waking day leads up to being able to sleep. And if we're sort of knocked off, it can. So obviously we've discussed caffeine, we've discussed all of the anxieties and those sorts of things. Other reasons can be sleep disorders such as restless leg syndrome, which a lot of people suffer with, which is a real discomfort in your legs, especially just as you're going to bed.
Is that a stress thing?
No, we don't actually know the full mechanisms of why people get it. We know that people who are iron deficient have more symptoms. Pregnant women have symptoms a lot more. Some people we think may have it genetically. So we don't know the exact methods of how it affects us, but it can really prevent people from falling asleep. And it's often linked with a disorder called periodic limb movements of sleep, where you twitch your leg or feet throughout the night, and that really disrupts your sleep quality. So that's one to look out for if you feel like you get restless or you need to move your legs or they get hot before you go to bed and you also are not a good sleeper, then that's worth checking out. People who snore and have breathing disorders, that's a big one. So
do they wake themselves up?
They actually wake themselves up. And sometimes if they're having any partial obstruction of the airway, which can happen when you snore and your lower jaw falls back in sleep, the brain sort of thinks that it's being deprived of oxygen a little bit and it will wake you up. Because obviously oxygen is the most important thing for the human brain. That's its priority. So if there's any compromise to that, it will wake us up. So people who snore actually often are very tired and can fall asleep very quickly, but they will wake up quite a lot and get quite frustrated and sometimes not know why they've woken up, unless the partner's digging them in the ribs. So those are fairly common sleep disorders, which can be really disruptive and prevent you from falling asleep. Children, they can prevent you from falling asleep.
Yeah, babies.
Yeah. That leads to lots of sleep deprivation.
Even shift work as well could.
And shift work and jet lag. So those in this sort of society, and especially here in Hong Kong, so I do corporate wellness talks, and a lot of the concerns that come up are around having to be on late night calls, which they're on calls with the US. So that can be sometimes until, midnight. And then the brain is so wired that it's very difficult to then wind down. So having that sort of high cortisol really in our system that keeps us functioning, and sometimes adrenaline. So if you exercise too late towards bedtime, that can really keep us awake as well.
Yes, I used to play netball where we wouldn't finish till 10 o'clock at night on a Monday night sometimes. And then I'd get home and be
buzzing.
Can't sleep. Yeah, but at the same time, if you do exercise early in the day, it can help you sleep better at night, can't it? Because your body is expending some energy. Is that right?
Exactly. So physical movement is really important. If you can go and do a sport, brilliant, because if it's something you love, that's even better. We generate more of a chemical called adenosine when we exercise and we physically are active, and that strengthens our sleep drive. So the more we physically tire ourselves out, the better we will be able to fall asleep and the deeper we'll be able to sleep as well.
What sort of people come to work with you? Are they people from all ages, babies, teenagers, adults? Are they high functioning, are they in desperate states, or do you get people sometimes that really just aren't managing to sleep very well?
It's a mixture. Often I will get people that are in a bit of a desperate state because by the time they get to me, they've usually tried everything. They've got themselves quite wound up about the fact that nothing's working. And sort of seeking help from a sleep specialist is kind of a last resort. There's not that much availability around. And lots of people don't realise that there is help out there.
No, I didn't even know there was a sleep specialist until I went to the Talking Mental talk and saw you there. And I was like, wow.
So sometimes
it's just what I needed.
Sometimes it's just people that aren't aware. But yeah, usually they're in a fairly desperate state. Or they are just aware that sleep is really important and they want to come and get some help. It's almost like, you want to get a personal trainer for fitness. Some people just want a sleep coach to help them optimize their sleep quality because they know the benefits that will bring.
And as a sleep coach, do you sit and watch people sleep at all? Or is it really just them reporting back to you and trialing different things?
Yeah, so not anymore. So my first 13 years actually of working in sleep therapy was in clinical sleep clinics where we would wire people up and watch them sleep. So I saw some really interesting things in that time. But now, as an independent consultant and someone that helps people with insomnia and general sleep training, I don't watch them, but I do get them to complete sleep diaries and report back to me. Yeah, I check in with them usually on a weekly basis and see the areas which are working and not working and motivate them to stay on track.
That's awesome. Tell me some of the crazy things you saw when you were in a sleep clinic.
As a polysomnographist.
Did you see sleepwalking?
We saw a lot of sleepwalking. We saw night terrors where people sit up and scream.
I've had them, loads of them.
Interesting.
And sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sleepwalking, sleep talking, night terrors, sleep paralysis, where people wake up out of a dream and they can't move. So they're sort of still half in that paralyzed dream state, but half conscious. And they're hallucinating that there's someone coming to attack them, which is quite scary if anyone's had that.
That would be freaky.
That's often if your sleep rhythm is disrupted, if you're doing shifts or you're sleep deprived. We've seen people acting out all sorts of unusual things. We had unfortunately, a really sad story that we had was a gentleman that had come in because he thought he was being attacked in the night and he'd actually strangled his wife to death, which was horrific. And this absolutely lovely gentleman, and he was coming in for us to be able to confirm whether he had this particular disorder, sleep disorder, which was really, really sad.
So he did that in his dream while he was still asleep?
Yeah, he believed he was being attacked and he was defending himself.
Oh my gosh.
And this is a horrible sleep disorder called REM behavior disorder, which is often associated in older age, not always, but often a precursor to someone developing Parkinson's disease as well.
Right, interesting.
And people often act out very violent. They believe they're being attacked, even if the person's not violent themselves and has no history of being violent. The dreams are very violent and they will kick, punch, shout, and try and defend themselves in bed, which can have disastrous consequences.
Wow. So I was in Macau with a girlfriend of mine. We were sharing a hotel room. We were over there. This is 12, 13 years ago. And I believe that I saw her being attacked by a guy in the room in my sleep. I'd woken up or was still asleep or whatever. And I started beating him off her with a pillow. And so she woke up to me smashing her face in with a pillow. Poor girl. She's never travelled with me again.
I was going to say, have you been away since?
No.
Yeah,
I thought she was being attacked, and that's happened to me twice.
Interesting. Was that whilst you were on sleeping pills or not?
No, that was previously. That was pre-sleeping pills. Yeah, and even pre-perimenopause.
So sometimes, did you say you had done a bit of sleepwalking as well in the past?
Yes, I've done lots of sleepwalking bits and bobs and a lot of night terrors of feeling afraid that somebody's in the house. A lot of the time jumping up, or I'm rescuing students, all my kids.
You do some good as well.
Yeah, I've got to go save students who are in trouble, and I run out of my room and I grab stuff, and so it happens to me a lot.
Yeah, so this sounds like
less lately though.
This does sound like you're predisposed to these sorts of things, and that we do find that. So often as children, most children will sleepwalk and talk and act out strange things in their dreams, but only a very small percentage of adults go on to continue doing that. So it sounds like you are one of the few.
Right.
And other than sleeping tablets, if it really is serious, really it's about good sleep hygiene, making sure you're not sleep deprived because that will often trigger it, making sure there's no underlying sleep disorders there that might trigger it. And sometimes there's things, if you get disrupted by noise or anything else, if you're in a deep sleep and there's some noise or something, it can sometimes trigger us to start doing it because sleepwalking and these sorts of things come out of deep sleep.
I feel like looking back that a lot of it is associated with stress. If I'm more stressed, if I had more stress in my life, that's a time when I'm more likely to do it. But I remember as a child getting out of bed, running into mum and dad's room going, I've got spiders on me, I've got spiders on me, they're on me, they're on me. And then they looked at my leg and I had a bobby pin hair clips attached to my pajama pants.
Ah, so that was like tickling you and you were thinking.
I thought that was spiders, but that had all happened in my dream.
It's funny how you remember that.
Yes, I do.
Years ago. It's quite
from
traumatic.
When I was little. Yeah, it's crazy. There's lots of weird things can happen. Tell me, what's sleep apnea?
Sleep apnea is a sleep breathing disorder where the airway partially or completely closes over when we fall asleep. So we can be falling asleep and the lower jaw will start to drop back as we relax and the upper airway will start to close over. Sometimes our tongue will fall back as well. And if we're overweight and we've got excess fat tissue around the neck, that will all contribute. But even if we have an anatomically narrow airway, when we fall asleep, sometimes the tissues close and collapse. and we will be trying to breathe and we can't. So we're making the breathing effort, but nothing can get in or out. And the brain will detect the changes in the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels and it will wake us up. And sometimes people don't realize why they've woken up, but they know they've woken up. And sometimes they will realize that they've woken up with a bit of a sort of gasp and a little bit scared that they feel like they can't breathe. But most of the time, people won't remember it. And it can happen over and over and over and over again, which means that all night you're having these apneas and you wake up, even though you feel like you've slept for 7 or 8 hours, you wake up and feel exhausted. So that is sleep apnea.
Do most people experience it, or is it just a small number of people?
Most people, it's quite normal to have a few apneas during the night. And if it's only a few, it's really nothing to worry about. When it's more than around 15 an hour, which sounds a lot, but clinically that's, enough to say that you're probably going to have some significant sleep disruption and some symptoms from that. And sometimes severe sleep apnea, over 30 times an hour, this can be happening more than once every 2 minutes.
Really?
So you can imagine how disrupted your sleep is, because we have to physically wake up very briefly every time we open the airway.
Can that be cured, sleep apnea?
In a sense, it can. Usually, CPAP machine, which stands for continuous positive air pressure, is the gold standard therapy. And this involves wearing a mask over the nose or mouth or both. It's connected to a little machine which sits by the bed, and it pumps air into the airway to splint the airway open, which sounds horrific. But when someone tries it for the first time, even though psychologically they think, oh, I'm never going to sleep with this, it's awful. Once they put it on and they fall asleep, the sleep quality they get is so incredible because their airways are held open all night. They are addicted and they get the best sleep, and they're like, I'm never sleeping without it again. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than one night. And I'm sure there'll be listeners that have experienced it and tried it and they've had a bad experience. The key to this is making sure that you have someone, a sleep specialist, that can support you and teach you about it and help you acclimatize to it. Because once you get the right type of mask fit and everything like that, you can really have a great experience, and it will save your life in the end, because sleep apnea, when it's severe over years, can really increase chances of horrible things like heart attacks and high blood pressure and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, can it?
It can. It's pretty serious if it's left untreated.
Right. How does somebody know they've got sleep apnea? I guess they're waking up all the time.
Well, no, you wouldn't even necessarily remember it, because sometimes when the wakings are so brief that you have no memory.
So how do you know?
It's a difficult one. Often it's a partner that will notice that someone's snoring and then they stop breathing and take a big gasping breath and then they go back to sleep. If you haven't got a partner there with you, then try and think about whether you've been told you snore, if you have spend a night sharing a room with anyone, whether you wake up feeling tired and unrefreshed despite feeling like you've had a decent night's sleep. Sometimes people do have a very restless sleep and the bed covers are all over the place. Getting up to go to the toilet frequently in the night is another symptom. Having a bit of a morning headache. You could do, and also menopause in women, the rates of sleep apnea in women at menopause significantly go up.
Do they?
They do.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
They do. So maybe worth having a test.
I might have to book in with you now. So you can test for sleep apnea?
We can. I work independently, but I also work with a clinic in Hong Kong which can do sleep tests. Unfortunately, I haven't been here long enough to get my own diagnostic testing service up and running yet, although I would love to. And I am working on that. But I work with a company that can do home sleep tests. They come to your home, they give you the equipment to wear, and then we analyze the results and we can make a diagnosis from there.
Wow, that sounds very interesting, really well worth doing, because it's quite incredible how much of an impact a good sleep can have on your day and your life and your well-being and your mental health compared to a bad sleep.
Absolutely. And we all know how we feel after 1 or 2 bad nights' sleep, and how unmotivated we are, how, irritable we get, emotional. And if you imagine that that's happening long term, we change as a person. We're completely different. Even the types of food we crave, because of the hormones, our leptin and ghrelin, which are our hunger hormones and the satiety hormones, they're changed. So even down to what food we crave is changed from poor sleep. So our whole person changes.
And what do you say to those kids out there, or the teenagers who, particularly in Hong Kong, are staying up so late studying, and they're cramming, and they think that if they stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning and study, then get up at 6 or 7 in the morning and do well in an exam? What do you say to those teenagers?
So we've all been there. I remember doing that myself.
I never did it.
Okay, some of us.
Yeah.
So the important thing that we know about sleep is that sleep is when the new information that we learn consolidates and goes into our memory. So if you are staying up to learn a load of stuff and you don't get the sleep, it's literally going in one ear and out the other. Sleep is vital to put that information into our memory and to be able to recall it. So you're better off doing some studying slightly earlier and prioritizing your sleep, and what you've learned will stick with you and you'll be able to wake up. You are also more creative and more knowledgeable from getting better sleep.
And then you're also going to concentrate better when the exam's happening, because you're
going to concentrate better.
Because your concentration without the sleep, it drops, doesn't it? And that's why we forget names, or we forget what we're doing, or we're halfway through a task and can't remember where we're going with it.
Completely. So it's 100% should be a priority if you want to do well in your exams, to prioritize your sleep. And teenagers need more sleep than adults.
How much do we need, teens and adults?
Teens, everyone's different. There's no one definitive answer for this. But teens, usually between 8 and 9 hours a night. As adult, we vary between the average 7 to 8. But 8 is this number that is thrown around in the media a lot. But actually, a lot of people are absolutely fine on less than that. And it's more about sleeping regularly and keeping everything regular with your body clock. You're better off getting, 7 hours of regular sleep than trying to get 8 or 9 one day and less than the other day. So it's more about keeping regular.
Routine is really
routine
important.
Is key.
And this is why we shouldn't sleep in on the weekends, even though we feel like we're getting this great sleep in and we're relaxing.
Yeah.
That can then impact our next night's sleep, can't it? And get us out of whack.
Exactly. So often, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that Sunday night effect where you've had a couple of lie-ins over the weekend and you might have had a couple of late nights to go with it. But even if you haven't, you get to Sunday night, you've got work in the morning, you're starting to stress about it and you can't sleep. Yeah. And that's because your brain's not ready to sleep yet.
Yes.
It's not been awake long enough. So as well as the anxiety around, oh no, I've got to be up in this many hours for work and I've got a big presentation to do tomorrow, I've got an exam in the morning, keeping a regular wake-up time over the weekends is key. But you really want to be making sure you're not sleep deprived any night of the week, if possible. Obviously, we're realistic and life happens. There's going to be nights where you get less. But try and just keep it more regular. And if you do want to have a lie-in, don't try and have it maybe only 30 minutes, hour maximum.
If I'm getting up at 6 a.m. every morning, I should get up at 6 on a weekend? 7.
Yeah, I would be able to. You can play around with it because you might find at the moment, whilst you're coming, you're trying to get off your sleeping tablets and you're trying to get your body clock back in check. I would recommend being really strict with it and keeping to 6 o'clock every morning. Once you're quite confident with your sleep and your sleep routine is back in the swing of things, then you can be a little bit flexible and know what affects you. So try having a lie-in for an hour. And if you struggle a little bit the next night, then bring it back to half an hour.
That makes sense.
Listen
and
to
it's
your body.
Interesting what I've noticed as I'm getting older is that I am certainly, even on a natural morning, waking up earlier than I used to. In my 20s and my 30s, I could sleep till 11, 12, 1. But now a sleep in for me would be 8:30.
Yeah. So
I can't sleep much later than that now.
And that's often your body's way. And as we do age, not saying that you're in any way getting old.
No, I look very young.
from really like mid-20s onwards, we're aging.
Yes.
We're past our, peak. It's a sad, depressing thought.
I think we're past our peak at 16, apparently.
Yeah, biologically.
Yeah.
We are less able to produce deep sleep and we produce less melatonin as we get older as well. So these things are all working against us being able to stay asleep for a nice long period of time. So
how can we produce more melatonin? Is being out in the sun a part of it? Being outside?
Yeah.
Daylight?
Keeping everything regular so your body clock knows when to release melatonin. Melatonin is released in response to generally the disappearance of light. Oh, that's what it used to be. So light is the main influencer of our body clock, our sleep-wake cycle. So getting actually plenty of light at a regular time in the morning directly impacts the melatonin release in the evening. So really important once you're up at that regular time each morning to get loads of bright light. If you're up before the sun rises, then turn on all the lights in your apartment, or at least have a couple of bright sort of whitish lights that you turn on wherever you are. Don't want you to waste all the electricity. But nice bright lights in that first couple of hours of the day can have a real impact on the amount of melatonin you produce later.
Now, I'm sure there's many people out there listening who would love to know whether you've worked with people for snoring in particular and whether you actually do anything to help stop snorers.
So there's definitely a lot of advice that I can give. Snoring is something that if you have some of the other symptoms of sleep apnea, then it's definitely worth getting a sleep apnea test, especially if you're someone that does wake up feeling unrefreshed and has low energy levels. Sometimes it's difficult to tell because it's just become the norm and we don't really have anything to compare it to. So we don't know what's affecting our energy levels. But if you are a known snorer, you're not a great sleeper, then it is worth getting it checked out. There are also devices that you can get from the dentist, which if they're a dentist which knows about sleep apnea and you can check with them, they can give you an appliance which actually you wear at night, which holds your lower jaw forward. So it's like a little gum shield that you put over your top and bottom teeth, and they're connected and your lower jaw is held forward because often when you snore, it's your lower jaw falling back and sort of making that noise as the vibrations of the tissues getting close at the back of the airway. So holding your jaw forward can help massively. Making sure you don't lie on your back because, the gravity will impact the amount of space at the back of the airway. Alcohol can be a massive influencer on the amount of snoring as well. So it can really make someone who doesn't snore, and it can definitely worsen someone who snores.
Is that because everything is more relaxed?
Everything is more relaxed, exactly.
Right. Okay.
So most people will have experienced if they've had a drink or two, they'll fall asleep very quickly and they'll snore, especially if they're on their back.
Yeah. How can we quiet our minds? You know how everybody's so busy, people have so many things that they've got to do, so many things that they worry about or that they've got to remember. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why I can't fall to sleep. One of my biggest problems is falling to sleep so slowly. Like sometimes I can go to bed at 9 or 10 and still be awake at 2. I haven't been able to get to sleep. And how can we turn our minds off? What are some of the tricks that we can use?
This is a very common question that I get asked because everyone's looking for the answer.
The magic answer.
Now, there are a few little tricks, but essentially there's no magic answer for this. I always say a good night's sleep and being able to switch the mind off starts from the moment you wake up because it's all to do with the amount of cortisol and adrenaline that's going around our system. And cortisol is like our stress hormone, but it's also a hormone that's essential to us being able to wake up and be alert in the first part of the day. Now, often with the chronic stress that a lot of people in this day and age experience, the cortisol levels, after we've woken up, they should start to gradually reduce throughout the day. But because we're rushing, straight away we wake up, a lot of us immediately will check our phone, or we're rushing to get the kids ready, or we're rushing to go to work. We don't take any time to just be calm and relax and do those sort of things that we enjoy. And so through the day, our cortisol never gets a chance to fall as it should. It stays chronically high. We get to the end of the day and we want a magic pill that will suddenly make us relax, but we can't. We've gone too far, so it will take hours sometimes. So actually, the key to being able to relax at night is to take some short periods during the day, even from the first thing you wake up, taking 5 or 10 minutes to be calm. And this is where a lot of people talk about mindfulness and meditation apps, because there is real science behind this that shows if you just take 5 or 10 minutes a couple of times a day to focus on mindfulness or meditation or breathing, not focus on the stress of daily life, your cortisol levels will drop and you'll feel really relaxed and you'll get to the end of the day and there'll be less work to do to relax, if you see what I mean. So that's one important thing to remember, is to actually try and take time to relax earlier in the day. Another thing that can be helpful is to write things down about 30 minutes before you go to bed.
Oh, that's a great tip. I like that.
So actually getting pen to paper, good old-fashioned style, getting it out of the mind and onto some paper and let it go. So when we then lie down, it's not whirring around in our head. That can be really helpful for some people, and some people I encourage to do that every single night, even if they haven't really got much to write about. Just whatever's on your mind, even a to-do list for the next day. And studies have shown that that can be really helpful. So those are little tricks. And then it really is about switching off your phone, being quite disciplined about that, because the phone is really stimulating, not only from the blue light shining into our eyes, confusing our body clock, but our life is on our phone these days. And it's very tempting to sit there scrolling through it or having it next to us. So put that away. Have a part of your night where you actually put it in a charging area away from your bedroom, and your mind then knows that that is the time that it's off, it's gone.
And so you have to have an alarm clock, like an old-fashioned alarm clock.
Until your body clock gets so good that you wake up naturally at the same time every day.
Does that happen for some people?
It does. It happens for me.
Does it?
I do set one on days when I've obviously got things to get up for, just as a backup, but I generally will wake up pretty much exactly the same time unless I'm jet lagged.
Wow.
So, I've got to be good at what I do. So I'm a good sleeper, but I have gone through periods where I haven't been a good sleeper and I've had to, employ the tactics which I teach.
What were some of the reasons why you weren't sleeping?
All sorts of things. I mean, going through difficult or stressful time, in the past, a relationship breakup or a death of somebody, there's times when, obviously, which happens to everybody, you're going to have some disruption to your sleep. And also jet lag, which is very common with us expats living over here. We're traveling all the time. So it's about getting back into the rhythm of things quite quickly.
I believe there's an app or a web page that can help you with jet lag. So it can program when you should sleep leading up to when you go. And then it means that you don't get jet lag when you go there. So
very clever.
Yeah. So there is this page. I know my daughter's used it. I can't remember what it's called, but you literally put in where you are and where you're going and when you're leaving. And it tells you what time you should go to bed and how you should sleep leading up to your trip.
Leading up to it. So I always advise, if people can, and especially if it's a long trip, to do that running up to the trip, just to take the edge off. Especially important with children. Adults can sort of take a hit, and adults have the discipline to, when they get the other side, you can stretch your day to make sure that you can stay awake. If you're doing it with children, and it's a really tough one, jet lag in kids, anyone who's experienced it will know, but really important to get them start to change their hours and their body clock using light. So you can artificially, use lights in the morning and the evening to keep it light and dark, to change their body clock and change their bed timings, at least ideally a week if you can, running up to the travel.
Right.
It will really help you the other side.
Yeah. Do you work with many children?
I do. I work with babies and children. So baby sleep coaching and training of new parents.
Oh, cool. So you're a bit of a super nanny as well.
A super nanny. I don't go and stay with them, but I provide consultations and give them programs and support throughout, because it's honestly, if a parent is wanting to do some sleep training and help their little ones start sleeping independently, there are lots of different ways to do that, but it can be really tough. So giving them the support throughout is really important, and reassuring them that they're doing, the right thing.
And also, as a new parent, if your baby's not sleeping, it can be super stressful and it can be really, really difficult. So
one of the hardest.
It's one of the most difficult parts of parenting, isn't it? If you've got a child that doesn't sleep. So
it really is. It's no reflection on you if they're a good sleeper or a bad sleeper. Some are just good, some are bad. But there are definitely things and habits that you can start getting them into.
Like routines just are so important, aren't they?
They're so important. The body responds so well. So routines and having a really clear night and day with the lights, being nice and bright in the daytime and dark and pitch black at night, really, for them. And the way we talk when it's wake time and sleep time, there's all sorts of things that can help before we can communicate to them that it's time to be awake and time to be asleep. So there's lots of little things, but essentially those first few months, there's nothing. You're going to need to be up with them, and they're going to sleep when they need to sleep and wake when they
So what age might you start working with the baby? Like at 3 or 4 or 5 months or something? Really
between sort of 4 and 6 months. That's when they start to develop their actual sleep cycles like an adult will have. So before that, they don't. They just have deep sleep really and dream sleep, which is called active and non-active sleep. And after around 4 months, they start to develop sleep cycles, which is why the famous 4-month regression, people talk about that, because the babies start waking up very regularly during the night. And that's because they're not learning, or they haven't learned, understandably, that when they wake up between their sleep cycles, they have to go back to sleep on their own, because up until now, they've usually been fed or cuddled, or they've been close to their mum or dad. And it's really disconcerting for them when they wake up after 45 minutes or an hour and a half, and they're just in this, dark place on their own, and they cry because they want someone to come and be with them, because that's all they know.
That's their habit,
That's their habit, and that's all they've ever known. So it really is teaching. Sleeping independently is really a skill that they have to learn, and it can be over time, and obviously when you feel they're ready, but it really is helpful for them to be able to fall back to sleep on their own, because it means that you're not up with them every night, and they get a much better consolidated sleep, which is really important for their development.
Do you work with parents with the controlled crying method, or do you use other methods to get the child to sleep?
It really depends on the parent's approach, and obviously it's completely up to them. There are methods and controlled crying. The thing about crying is, I think it's got a bit of a bad rep, but essentially babies can only really communicate in 1 or 2 ways. They cry when they're in unusual situations, or they're unhappy and they want something, and, content and smiley when they're not. Now, when you're teaching a baby to learn to sleep independently, then there's going to be a period where it's something new, they're on their own. And I don't really believe in letting them just cry, because this does show that it's, stressful for them. But if they're going to need to be a little bit lenient about the amount of crying, because it's something new, and a few days of them having short periods of crying as you teach them to fall asleep really is much better in the long run than them having months or even years of disrupted sleep. And you as a parent having disrupted sleep, because the studies all show that is far more harmful to the child and to the parent's mental health than having
a few days of crying.
A week or two of maybe a little bit more crying than usual, but then they sleep beautifully and they're much happier for it.
Yeah, and controlled crying generally or usually only takes about 4 or 5 days, doesn't it?
If you're consistent. The key is to be consistent. The little one only knows, it's confusing for them at the start, but if you're consistent with your methods, they very quickly learn. So consistency is key with that. And you can be there and you can cuddle them and you can soothe them at certain times, but you do need to be consistent. Otherwise they get confused and they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And Kate, just to finish up, does counting sheep really work to help you get to sleep? Where does that come from? What's the history of that?
I should know that, but I don't know where that comes from. It's a method of repetitive thought and trying to distract your mind from everything else that's going on. It's like a breathing technique. So a lot of people now will talk about, breathing and focusing on counting your breathing as you fall asleep. It's a way to distract the mind. Essentially, what would work better is to you shouldn't be trying to fall asleep. If you're not sleepy yet, don't go to bed. Go to bed when you're sleepy. If you're going to bed because you think you have to because it's your bedtime and you're not sleepy, you're not having physical signs of sleepiness like yawning and eyes feeling heavy, you're going to lie there awake. And the more you try and sleep, the more stressed you're going to get.
And that's something else that I realised. Like I've been going to bed sort of at 8 or 8:30, seriously, because I'm so stressed about not being able to sleep. And I think, oh my God, I need 3 hours to get to sleep, so I've got to go to bed at 8:30. But in actual fact, if I stay up till 10:30 or 11, I've realised I will go to sleep quicker.
Yeah, you're much better off those 3 hours where you're like, right, I've got to put that aside for trying to sleep. You're much better off taking those 3 hours and doing something you enjoy, something that relaxes you, not worrying about it. When you start to then feel sleepy, check in, you can feel the symptoms, and then go to bed and try and sleep. One of the key things when you're struggling with insomnia or getting back to trying to sleep after being on sleeping tablets is to spend as little time in bed awake as possible. So if you go to bed and you wake and your mind's sort of wide awake and you're stressed, it's actually best to get up out of bed, go and read or do something that you enjoy relaxing elsewhere, take your mind off it. When you start to yawn, start to feel sleepy, come back to bed and try again.
Oh, that's a great tip. See, look, I've had my own sleep session. That's brilliant. Kate, if people want to get in touch with you, and can you work with people overseas as well? Because we've got listeners in 111 countries around the world.
I heard. I'm very impressed with that.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Well done.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. So can you work with people online as well?
Yes. So the reason I've set up my company Sleep HQ is to offer help where it has not been accessible before. So I do Skype consultations or phone consultations, and that is accessible to anyone who has an internet connection or a phone. And yes, I offer it to all. So my website's www.sleep-hq.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at sleephqhk for Hong Kong. And Twitter, I believe, is sleep_HQ. So you can follow me on social media. I give lots of tips, free tips and advice. And it has ways to contact me, of course, if you want to get in touch to have a proper consultation. And I can give advice as well as a full course of coaching for insomnia and for babies and children as well.
Brilliant. Kate, thank you so much. This has been so interesting and really super helpful for me as well. So
we'll get you in for a sleep test.
Definitely. I think I might have sleep apnea or the night terrors or something.
You've got a full range.
I know. I'll be an interesting client. So, Confidants, if you have any friends out there who you feel would benefit from this podcast, if you've got any friends who aren't sleeping very well, please can you share this podcast with them? And if you could go to iTunes to rate and review us, it will help me get up the iTunes charts, and it will help Kate get more people to come and have sleep tests with her. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Really, really appreciate it. And I just also want to mention for those people in Hong Kong, we're having Hong Kong's very first podcast festival on Monday, the 27th of May at the Fringe Club, and tickets will be on sale soon. I'll let you know in another podcast when they're on sale. But we'd love for people to come along. We've got #Impact, Regina from #Impact Podcast. We've got Sarah from Better in Bed. We've got Aaron from Talking Mental. And we've got Sir Mai from Sassy Hong Kong. And me from Hong Kong Confidential. So come along and watch us do live podcasts. So anyway, Kate, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. And I think that so many people are going to absolutely love this podcast and get so much out of it.
I hope so. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Kate. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.